Welcome back, everybody. David L. King, aka DavidXRPLion, coming to you on January 9th, Friday, at about 6:55 p.m. Mountain Time. I am so excited to be able to present this to you today. I've covered a lot of interesting information about JFK, and this is the synopsis. When the Lord brought this to me and had me go back, because I was working on the silver pricing. By the way, that video is coming out after this one within the next day. I'm going to be working on it tomorrow, just to give you a little heads up. Everything ties together. Everything ties together. And that's what is so exciting, and what I'm so excited to share with you today, tonight, and over the weekend. You're going to learn who John F. Kennedy was. Now, this isn't the encyclopedia version, but again, as you know, I like to build a foundation so we have something to stand on. It's proven. It passes everything that we need to know and understand. NESARA. He's the father. The grandfather was Lincoln. He's related to Lincoln. He's a Colony. Everyone's related, and it makes total sense. Why? But John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, is still alive, and I'm going to show you how. Book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 27 says, "For the Lord of hosts called forth, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back?" That is a scripture to stand on with regards to everything that President John F. Kennedy stood for while he was in office. Pass this word out. This is a must-see video. And we know we're not trying to prove dates, but what it does, it supports events. And whatever conclusions you draw from this, they're your conclusions. I'm simply here at the call of the Lord to be his messenger, to provide you with information so that you can make the best informed decision for yourself. I'm not here to try to sway you. I don't bring in my opinion. This is all coming from the Lord. This is about over a week in the making, and we just finished it up. And that's when I went into the studio to begin to record this. But hang on. As I always suggest, just watch it first. You don't want to miss anything. You can go back and watch it again and take notes, but hang on. Here we go. John F. Kennedy, he lived a purpose-driven life with a purpose-driven plan. He was born, let me back up. He became president on January 20th of 1961, and that presidency ended on November 22nd, 1963. His life is a legacy. And for those of you that know, it goes way back, his lineage, his legacy, and it's a timeline. And that's what I'm excited to share with you today. He was born on May 29th of 1917. He began his career with the U.S. Senate on January 3rd, 1953. His time in the Senate as a senator ended on December 22nd, 1960. Why? Because he was nominated to be the president of the United States. He was sworn in as president of the United States on January 20th, 1961. What did he do during his presidency? What was the legacy? What did he leave for the American people? That's what you're here to find out today. The story that they tried to hide, and I can speak firsthand about this, and you'll see why shortly if you're not aware. But this was Kennedy's most secret and guarded plan. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, David, what do you mean? Kennedy had a secret and guarded plan. Just hold on. He died at 46 years old, but his plan was for 64 years later. This was his purpose-driven plan. If you look at the document he's holding, it gives you some information that's relevant for today. And that's why I bring this up. This is relevant for today. The gentleman over here on the right-hand side, that is Chairman Dan Rostenkowski. He was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He worked hand in hand with Kennedy since Kennedy came in. And what did they do together? Kennedy created a plan, and Dan Rostenkowski was right there to help him pull it all together. Privatized the Postal Service, remapped Social Security, no income, corporate, or estate tax, no gift or capital gains tax, replaced with a 14% consumption tax on new items, not on anything related to food, clothing, utilities. Think of it as a tax on what you purchased, cars, homes, that would level the playing field across the board. A billionaire would pay the same 14% on his $250 million yacht as anyone would pay on buying a Ford truck, a Chevy truck, a Mercedes-Benz. And there was a $25 million age adjustment payment coming back to everybody based upon a minimum age of 24. And they were working for 30 years down the road. And when I started to put all this stuff together, that's when it really hit me and it began to make sense. Because remember, they come up with these ideas that they want to implement for the betterment of humanity, for Americans, for citizens of the United States. But it doesn't always mean that it's going to be instantaneous because of the protocols and the rhetoric of politics. The House of Representatives, the Senate, this vote, that vote. And over time, it got just ridiculous. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. And each one of those institutions on their own became a weapon against presidents, presidencies, terms. Why? Because they knew they could outlast a president. If a president only had 2 4-year terms, they could outlast him for 8 years and hopefully have their own type of president in office to do what they wanted to do. So it was more about what the congressmen and the senators wanted to do, House of Representatives, than it ever was about a president. But see, here's a man who came in realizing what the system was, realizing that the Federal Reserve, which had come in 1913, was working against the American people. It had created its own monetary system, separate from our U.S. Treasury, which only had coinage. The Federal Reserve took over our paper money and made it such that they loaned it to us, loaned it to the government. So who was Dan Rostenkowski? He was a United States representative from Chicago. He served for 36 years from 1959, so he came in before JFK until 1995. He became one of the most powerful legislators in Congress, especially in matters of taxation. And I want you to understand why I put this in here. It says he was imprisoned in 1996. And I'll tell you just a little bit about that. But here's his credentials. Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, January 3rd of 81 till May 15th of 1994. House Democratic Chief Deputy Whip from 77 to 81. Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, 67 to 71. U.S. House of Representatives, 59 to 95. The man did a lot. He was responsible for the tax legislation to reduce taxes from 91% down to 28%. He was a Democrat working with JFK. And I want you to focus on that. You don't stand with credentials like this and not be recognized as somebody who was powerful. He became one of the most powerful legislators in Congress, especially in matters of taxation. Part of Kennedy's legacy when he was in the White House as president in September of 1951, he amended Executive Order 10289. So the amendment became Executive Order 11110. And this is famous. Everybody knows about this executive order. This is when he signed it. This is when it was filed. So June 4th, 1963. Shortly after Kennedy came into the presidency, he met with President Sukarno, who was a very powerful man. He was in control of a lot of money, humanitarian money. He was a cousin to JFK, lineage-wise. Now, I'm not here to prove or disprove the Green Hilton Memorial. It's my understanding it was an agreement where Sukarno, not wanting to deal with the nefarious Khazarian mafia, fake Jew bankers, decided he would work directly with JFK. JFK wanted to remove the Federal Reserve from its role in our monetary system. He wanted to get back to a currency standard that was backed by gold. I went ahead and pulled up a narrative that I found on this agreement, and you can read through it. I want to highlight the high points for you. And that was in 1963, Sukarno, and this isn't a spelling error. It's presented this way as well as the other way that I've spelled it. In 1963, he canceled the agreement with the Jewish bankers. This was the false Khazarian mafia bankers, and he transferred the gold and the gold rights to President of the United States, JFK. At the time, the United States was trapped in massive debt after being involved in the World War, and President JFK wanted the country to print money without debt. It goes on to talk about the Federal Reserve, and then it talks about what was happening with the bankers and the lobbyists. And after the MOU, the mutual offering, was signed as a sign of approval, the memorial agreement was established in Geneva, Switzerland, signed by Sukarno and JFK. Through the agreement, the United States government recognizes Indonesia's gold bar of more than 57,000 tons in 17 packets of gold packaging. Through the agreement, it was deposited with the Federal Reserve banking system against the dollar. It says this agreement is facilitated by the Tripartite Gold Commission. And through this agreement, also the power of gold changed hands to the American government. And from the agreement, the Executive Order 11110 was issued, signed by President JFK, authorizing, here's the key, authorizing the Treasury to take over the right to issue currency from the Federal Reserve. And you can read more about this. Then what happens? This gets signed on November 14th of 63. On the 22nd, Kennedy was killed in Dallas, Texas. The question is, was he killed? We'll leave that up to you to find out. So what happens? He's gone. Kennedy's gone. His program is still unfinished. It's on the chalkboard at the White House. What happens then? Time goes by. It's hidden. But wait, November 22nd, 1963 to November 22nd, 1994 is 11,110 days. We know this number. We've seen it. We just saw it. The Executive Order 111110. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That executive order was tied to a timeline, his legacy timeline. When he left office, alive or dead. What happened on April 22nd, 1994? Well, let me tell you what happened. Changed my world. On that day, I was attending a private continuing education seminar over 3 days in Los Angeles at an LAX hotel. And it was Friday, the last day. And one of the educators who had put together the program asked a bunch of us, 25 to 35 somethings, if we could stick around for a little while after it was over on Friday afternoon at like 4:30 in the afternoon. And of course, there's a lot of people just, they're done. They want to get home, start their weekend. You know, they want to do their 5, do their 2, and then start their 5 all over again. And he asked me if I could stay. Well, I had an hour drive home. We had 3 days of intense tax training. I was bushed, but the Holy Spirit told me, Dave, you need to stay. And the person told us, hey, there's somebody coming in. They're going to be laid over from their flight home, and they want to come and talk to you guys about some stuff. That's it. That's all he told us. So 15 minutes goes by, 20 minutes goes by, half an hour goes by, and he says, he's on his way. He's coming over from the airport. He just got off the plane. And, you know, I'm like, man, I just want to get home. I'm tired. But I stayed because the Holy Spirit told me to stay. So at about 45 minutes after, he comes running in the room. You could tell he had been humping it because he was like sweating. And the person putting on the continuing education seminar, tells us, okay, he's here. He's in the building. He's trying to find us. And we're kind of off in a back room. And he comes walking in, and the person introduces him and says, I want to introduce to you Dan Rostenkowski, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. And we're all like, okay. See, we were just a bunch of young tax people. We weren't, at that time, we weren't involved in the politics of the world or even America. We were focused on helping people with their tax needs and things of that nature. I didn't know who he was. I don't think there was a person in the room other than the host who knew who he was. And he says, hey guys, he says, I just got off my plane. I got a little bit of a layover. I had to be here to talk to you guys today. And I know you're really going to enjoy what I have to share with you. So I've only got about 30 to 35 minutes, so I'm going to go quick. But he says, let me tell you about this program that no one knows about that's been on the chalkboard at the White House since Kennedy. And of course, my ears are perking up. And he says, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to privatize the Postal Service. And he says, Federal Express flies all the U.S. mail anyway, and they want to be able to have access to everybody's home on a daily basis. So it's a really good fit for them. And then he says they're going to remap Social Security. And what does that mean? We're just as curious as can be. And he says, here's what the plan is. They're going to draw a line in the sand at a certain age. And they're going to say, if you're this age by this date, you'll stay in the Social Security system. You'll be contributing into your Social Security, through your wages and things of that nature. And you'll be able to receive Social Security benefits down the road. And of course, we're not wanting to be too forward by asking him a ton of questions. And he knew that. And he kind of leaned forward and he said, let me give you an idea of what this looks like, guys. He says, let's just say, for example, we draw a line in the sand and we say, if you're 45 years old after the first part of the year, you'll stay in and continue to contribute to your own Social Security. And if you're not, there'll be 4 to 8 government options that you can choose from in order to put your own money into it and save for your own retirement. We're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He says, there will be no income tax, no corporate tax, and no estate tax. And the energy in the room is like starting to rumble. It's like, yeah. Like we just all want to race out of the room and go tell our clients what's going on. And he says there will be no gift tax, no estate, no capital gains tax. Now we're really getting excited. We're like jumping up, high-fiving, because, we're thinking about, at that time, that's when the stock market was just starting to take off. People were investing into 401ks. So everybody was looking about growing their money. And now if you could do it without any taxes associated with it, how much more is it going to grow, right? And he says, because there won't be any taxes on income or gains or retirement or IRAs or anything like this, he says, there'll just be a flat 14% consumption tax. That's what he called it. And he said, it'll just be on, cars and homes and things that people would buy, not on your day-to-day necessities, medication, food, clothing, etc. He says, but here's the part that I'm really excited to tell you guys about. He says, there's going to be $25 million put aside for each and every one of you, but it's age adjusted. And of course, we're like listening, going, well, what does that mean? And he says, the older you are, the more you're going to get. The younger you are, you're going to get less. That's what the age adjustment means. And we're like, oh, okay. And he says, but before you leave today and run out and tell everybody about this, I need you to understand it's not going to happen for about 30 years. And it was like the oxygen got sucked out of the room. And we're going, I remember physically going, oh man, 30 years. And he goes, but he goes, let me tell you guys why this is so amazing for you guys, us 25 to 35 somethings. He goes, you guys are going to be at the age when this activates, you're going to get the maximum payout. Now, everybody's head spinning. We're trying to figure out what just happened. He's looking at his watch because he's making sure he's going to get out the door in time. And there wasn't a big question and answer period. It was just like, guys, here it is. This is what's on the chalkboard from Kennedy, going back to Kennedy. I worked with him on this, and this is what the White House is going to do. Having never heard this at all. Mind you, Mike Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. We're now April 22nd, 1994. That's a few years. It's like that, 30 years away. And then he's saying another 30 years away. But he says, just be patient. They know what needs to be done. It's going to happen. And he said, just go live your life like you normally would and just kind of keep the timeline in the back of your mind about what's going on. So that was it. Everybody left. I remember I wrote a white paper on it and figured out what the benefits for everybody would be. I even did more analysis on this amount because this wasn't just this amount 30 years away. It was this amount growing for 30 years. And that's in my video put out called 3 Payouts, where I cover that. And that in itself is an extraordinary view to see exactly how that played out. So what happened after this? This was 1994. Now, again, I'm not here to verify. I'm just putting out information that I believe is relevant. You may not believe it. You may ask ChatGPT or Grok or any other AI, and they're going to come back and say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. None of that's true. Well, I'm just going to give you the information that I've already looked at myself, and this is what I'm aware of. It was passed by Congress. NESARA was passed by Congress on March 9th, 2000. Now, mind you, when Dan Rostenkowski came on April 22nd, 1994, his words, we don't have a name for it yet. We don't know what it's going to be called, okay? Just so you're aware. We come to find out that the 107th Congress passed the bill. The bill was then hidden in the records because once this bill was signed, it was treason to release the information about it. Treason. Senators were killed. Congressmen were killed putting this information out. So Congress passed it March 9th, 2000, and it's identified that Bill Clinton signed the bill into law on October 10th of 2000, 7 months and a day, with nobody knowing what was going on at the time. Then what happened? We had 9/11. Here's when it was signed. And its effective date was supposed to be 9/11/2001. Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he was scheduled for a press conference at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, just outside the Twin Towers. And we know what happened. It didn't happen. Then we had, at the time, George Bush Jr. as president. We had the situation in New York City with the Twin Towers. And we had George Bush Sr. Now, it's said that George Bush, former U.S. president, and before that, director of the CIA, had taken over a $419 trillion humanitarian fund to use for his own personal, political, and war agenda to keep NESARA from ever happening for the people of America. I remember at the time, shortly thereafter, one time, that on 9/11/2001, $600 billion in gold bullion was stolen from underneath the Twin Towers, disappeared. And it was part of what was to be used to back our new monetary system. So it's been said that Bush Sr. used those humanitarian funds to implement his plan to keep NESARA from being implemented that day because they weren't going to lose control of the money of the Federal Reserve, IRS, etc. So let's come back here. So we've got April 22nd, 1994 to September 20th, 2024. There's that number again, 11,110 days. Executive Order 11110. Do you see what's going on here, everybody? This day was crucial. That's why Rostenkowski was adamant he had to be there to tell us about this program on that date. And then we roll forward again to this date. Go look up in history what was going on here. I believe history was set for Trump to still be in the White House, but that didn't happen. So now we go from September 20th, 2024, to when Trump came back into the White House, January 20th, 25. It's 122 days. Then we go from January 20th of 25 to January 11th of 26, 357 days. Well, guess what calendar is really close? The calendar in 1582, when they took off the days to convert from Julian to Gregorian. They took 12 days off the calendar. But what does it all look like? November 22nd, 63 to April, 11,110 days. April to September, 11,110 days. January 11th, 2026. January is 1. 11 is 11. 2 plus 2 plus 6 is 10. 11110. Kennedy's executive order number. One more time. When I saw this, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And the Lord had told me earlier in the week on Monday, he brought up that executive order. And I thought, Lord, why are you bringing this up? Well, now I know why. Now I know why. So remember back when we saw Kennedy was 46 years old and change when he supposedly passed away? From his inauguration in 61 to January 11th, 2026, it's the mirror of his age. 64 years, 11 months, 23 days. That's why in the slide it says about 65 years away. So where does that leave us? Right now, the Kennedy program is NESARA in the White House. Privatization of the Postal Service, remapping Social Security, no income, corporate estate tax, no gift capital gains tax, the 14% consumption tax, the 25 million age adjusted. The 65-year calendar timeline is up. It expires on Sunday, 1/11/2026. 11110, everybody. There's no other combination. There's no other date that achieves that. Now, 9/11, the mirror of that is January 19th, 11/9, just to put it out there. But we already have all the gold. So JFK's legacy is being fulfilled. It has been fulfilled. The keys are turned. The evil has been eradicated. We're simply waiting for the announcement from President Trump, our CIC, Commander-in-Chief, to tell us it's time. It's here. And all we're doing is waiting. That's all we're doing. I'm not saying January 11th is the day it gets announced, but we can check that box that the correlations of Kennedy's executive order number I've just proven. Everything timelines itself out to January 11th, 2026. WWG1 WGA, where we go one, we go all. John F. Kennedy saw what was going to happen. He worked with Dan Rostenkowski to lay it all out. The evil Khazarian mafia, fake Jews, bankers, Temple Bar, knew they couldn't keep it under wraps forever, but they tried. They tried. They've been defeated. If it hadn't been for John F. Kennedy, Dan Rostenkowski, and President Trump with the alliance, and all the people in between, we would not be stepping into NESARA. Now, mind you, this is restoration from the Almighty, the creator of all things, above, below, inside, and outside this universe. That was destined before the beginning of time, before the foundations of this world were created. So there wasn't anything going to stop him. But JFK stood in the gap. Dan Rostenkowski stood in the gap. No one would remember Dan Rostenkowski if I hadn't been at that meeting. Who here has told the story? No one except for myself. That's why I had to be there. That's why he called me to be his messenger, so that I could share with you what he has shared with me with regards to this whole legacy plan, it being fulfilled. There isn't anybody that has spent more time, has been in the right places at the right time than where God has put me. And I'm so humbled to have been chosen to do that. And I just want to say thanks, Dan. Kennedy, I'm sure, because they were personal friends, would say thanks, Dan. He'd say thanks, Donald. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this information. I hope you share it with your friends. This is David L. King, a.k.a. DavidXRPLion. Stay tuned for the silver video that's coming up in the next day or so. God bless.